Without further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Steve Good, who was kind enough to be our guinea pig for our first Skype in here in 2015. He had never done, we had never done one, he had never done one.
We only had to reconnect, what, about 10 times? So.
Huh?
We only had to reconnect about 10 times.
Right, but what I'm saying, it got off and it worked, and then we redid it in 2016, and then I was bad in 2016 when he was on the film in front of all the audience. I asked him to come to we were tired of Skype presentations, so we had to do this. And what's interesting is Steve came down to the show, and one of his friends allowed him to bring, I think there's only 2 of these in the United States, right?
Unless the ship rolled in today.
Yeah, so he's got the 2, and if you got the new Scroll Saw magazine, they're on the front cover.
That's the other one right there.
You got, oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. I didn't mean to. There we are. You got the 2. You got this one, which hasn't hit the market yet, and there's the Jet on the other side. So, without further ado, Mr. Steve.
Thank you, Heinz. I appreciate it. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a blogger. And if you don't know what a blogger is, that's somebody that has a website that basically posts a different message every day. And in my case, I blog about Scroll Saw. And I generally will put a pattern with every blog post. And most people download the patterns and they just skip reading all the stuff because most of us just blah, 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 blah. And this weekend, I just about completely lost my voice. So hopefully you'll be able to hear me and I won't run out of voice when this is over. I was a little bit under the weather last week, and then when I got to the show, I brought some projects to cut during the show. And I think I made about 5 cuts, and the rest of the time I was doing this. So, but it was unbelievably fun. And Mr. Brokaw back there, who basically set everything up for me and got me down here, I cannot thank you enough, Bob. I probably had more fun this weekend than I can remember since I was a child at Christmas. It was amazing. We had people coming in from different states around to talk to me, and you know, it's an ego boost. I don't care what anybody says when somebody appreciates what you do. So if you're not familiar with my blog, I've got some cards up here that Hans will pass out for me. And the blog is laid out in a few different sections, but if you look at the very top, this is where you're going to generally want to go. If you're looking for Scroll Saw patterns, there's a yellow button up there that says Pattern Catalog. And if you click on that button, it'll take you to my online catalog. There's over 2,000 patterns, and they're all free. So you can just browse through and download anything you want. I have a couple things for sale on the blog, but that's not what I'm about. I'm about growing the community. And when I started the blog, of course, I never had any intention that it would get as big as it has, but I started it to help new people come into the hobby. Because to me, I'm passionate about this community, and I'm passionate about bringing especially younger people. I mean, if we look around this room, we know we're all, you know, we're past our 40s, most of us. And we need to bring the younger generation into the hobby. And the best way to do that is to get them interested just by showing them what we do. Because most people, when they see what we do, they're amazed because they see that little tiny blade and they see the things we produce. And a lot of times, you know, they think it's cut with a laser. And when you actually show them that it's being done by hand, they're usually pretty impressed, and you can kind of drag those people in. And the other day I passed the 37 million pattern downloads. So you figure those patterns are going to be out there long after I'm dead, and that's pretty cool. And I'm lucky enough that I work with a lot of shop teachers around the country. You know, a lot of our high schools have lost their shop classes in the last 20 years, and they're slowly starting to come back. Well, the teachers, just like all the teachers out there, they have to go buy this stuff for themselves most of the time to teach our children, you know, what they're teaching. They do it all the time. Well, they can come to my blog and they can download these patterns for their children in the class to cut. And so those kind of things are really special, and that's why I'm blessed to be able to do what I do. You know, I get thank yous, but I can't express enough how much that thank you goes the other direction. because I'm a blessed man. I retired last year and I'm able to do what I love now. And it's a blessing. So that's what I do. I'm a blogger, I'm a pattern designer. Hans is a scroll sawer. I'm not a scroll sawer. So if you see me trying to demonstrate things, it's from a lot of years experience, but I don't cut. He cuts more in a weekend than I cut in a month. You know, so that's what I do, and that's where my passion is. I come from a computer background, so I'm able to take that computer background and tie it with a scroll saw, and that's how the patterns kind of came about. I had been into graphic arts and all kinds of computer stuff for years, so they just kind of merged together. And what I want to do today is I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the unusual side of the scroll saw. Hans can show you scrolling wood and wood projects all day long, and he's going to do a better job than I will of that. But because I'm a blogger and I have to come up with something new every day, I tend to get into the more unique things. So what I'm going to show you today are cutting metal, and we're going to do it in a couple different ways. We're going to cut copper jewelry, and we're going to cut coins. Now, I think we'll start out with the coins because that's usually where people have the most questions. And the first question I get every time I bring this up is that illegal? And no, you can deface money legally to make jewelry out of it. It's right on the U.S. Mint's website that the only time it is illegal is if you're doing it to defraud somebody. If you're trying to take a $1 bill and turn it into a $100 bill, not a very good idea. But if you're just going to take a coin and cut it into a piece of jewelry, that's perfectly fine. And it's kind of nice to take a quarter and turn it into $10. And that's basically what you're doing. Most of the people that do coin cutting for a profession, they actually use a handsaw. And you can do that with the same tools that we're going to use here today. I'm just a scroll sawer, so I started doing it on a scroll saw. So let's talk about coin cutting a little bit. And the jigs that I'm going to show you today are all set up for quarters because that's what I usually do. But you can make jigs, and you can make these at home. You don't have to buy a jig to do this. You can make them out of wood. And I have a YouTube video that shows you how to basically do that. You just take 2 Forstner bits of 1 inch and you drill it in just deep enough for your coin. And then you use a smaller bit and you drill it all the way through. And that will do the same thing that these do. If you look, the inside hole here goes all the way through, but the outside diameter is the diameter of the quarter. And I'll show you the different versions of this jig here in a minute. But this quarter actually fits inside, and if you look real close here, there's a ledge. And all you have to do is have a jig that will hold this quarter, because you can't hold it tight enough on the scroll saw to actually start cutting. You'd never be able to hold on to it. So what these jigs that I'm going to show you today are, they allow you to push that quarter in there and hold it real tight. Now the aluminum, we're trying to get this one made, but this was actually made by a reader of mine. That's kind of a funny story. I bought a 3D printer to make these jigs on, and I was mentioning on my blog that these weren't as durable as I wanted them to be. And a couple days later, this showed up in my mailbox. One of my readers, who happened to be a tool and die maker, made one for me and sent it to me. So, but these all work. They all work just the same. It's just this one's going to last a lot longer. So I'm hoping to get these made, but Marcus is helping me with that. So basically what you do is you put your quarter in there and you tighten it down so it's clamped in there real good. Then you go over to your drill press and you drill your holes. Now there are no patterns for cutting coins. It's kind of a freestyle type of situation. So what you're going to do is just drill some holes. And on a scroll saw, you're doing interior cuts inside of a pattern line generally. On this, you may put a hole in 2 or 3 different sections, even in the same section you're going to cut out. And I'm going to show you why up here on the board. If you've got a coin, and say we got our little man right here, and you've got your words across here and maybe your date down here, you may put an entry hole here and here, even though this is, say you're going to cut it out like this. And you're going to cut around his head. So you keep his head as part of the coin, and we're going to keep the date and these words at the top. Let's go down like this. So we're going to cut out all this section right here. When you're cutting wood and you come to a sharp turn, like say we're cutting around this direction, and you come to a sharp turn, on a scroll saw, you'll just make that turn and keep going. because as you make that turn, the teeth on the blade are nibbling out the waste to make the hole big enough for you to turn. In metal, because these blades, and we'll pass one around here in a minute. Hans, you want to take one out of there and pass it around so they can feel it? These blades are so fine that anytime that blade catches, you've got a really high likelihood of that blade breaking. So what you'll do is you'll generally cut up to this point, and say you came out this way and you did this, then you may come into this hole and come up and cut this way. That way you've come in from both sides and made that angle without actually having to turn the blade. Now you can turn the blade like on this radius right here. It's not an abrupt turn, so you can do that. Generally you can make that turn with no problem. As you get more skilled, you'll feel in your fingers when that blade's starting to get taut and it feels like it's going to break. If you go slow enough, you can make those turns, but when you're just getting started, you're better off to come into these tight turns from two different angles. And then what you'll do is, once you get this piece, it'll fall out, then you can come back in and continue cutting until you get the whole inside cut out. Now before you start, most people that are cutting quarters, they don't cut the head out. They'll cut the reverse side out with the state quarters, and it'll look more like, this one is the state of, I don't remember. This is Kentucky. What they'll do, this is one I cut the other day, you'll cut out the figure, and then you can use it as a piece of jewelry and inlay it. Now on Amazon, they sell Forstner bits that are exactly the size of coins. So what I did on that piece is I used the Forstner bit to drill in. Well, because the Forstner bit leaves a little point right there, I also cut out another piece of wood to put on top of that. So that's why you don't see the little brad point from the Forstner bit in the hole. You can also get router templates that I'm pretty sure they actually sell right here, that the template is the size of all the different quarters from a dime, a penny up to a dollar coin. And you can route it out and then you've got a smooth bottom. But somehow or another you need to route it out where you can put the coin in it. Now, there are also jewelry findings, and you can just do it as, let me get the right side. This is the state of South Carolina. And it's just a little soldier carrying a flag. So obviously you could do the same thing and make earrings out of it. And you would want to match that. And a piece like this, because I didn't get real detailed, and you don't have to get that detailed for it to, to be an item that you can sell. That piece probably took me an hour to cut, so you can tell I went pretty slow. There's not much cutting there, but I went slow. I had to. And what'll happen is you'll get to an area where, like right down here, where these bushes are down here, I had to go in and just nibble that out a little bit at a time. So you're not always doing typical scroll saw cutting. Sometimes you're using the edge of that blade almost as a sander to go back in and smooth things out. And that almost takes as long as, doing the rest of it. Because this outside area right here where there's a large opening, you can go pretty fast on that. But when you get into those details, well, as a matter of fact, if you look at the bottom of that flag, there's a little bit there that I could have carved away. So that's kind of what coin cutting is all about. Now I'm going to show you a couple of samples. Well, let me go for a couple other things. When you drill these out, the other side of the coin will get punched out. Pass this around. Feel the head side of this coin. The drill bit will leave a burr, and you have to get rid of that burr. And all I do to get rid of that is I just take a piece of sandpaper, lay it down flat, and I take the coin and do this until the burr's gone. And then sometimes you might even need some fingernail clippers, and you can just clip the rest of the burr off. So you want to get that burr off. The other thing you want to do is you want to make sure that coin is nice and polished. Most coins that you get out of circulation are not going to look like they need to look. And what you can do, and it's almost magic to watch it, Mother's Mag and aluminum polish. This stuff is amazing. And what I do to get this kind of gloss on a coin that looks like this, thank you, that helps. To get a coin that looks like this is I take a piece of board, this is MDF, and I take my Forstner bit and I just drill it deep enough to hold the coin. All right? I set that coin in there, and it serves two purposes. One is it holds it in place while you polish it, and the second is you will be very surprised how hot this coin's going to get. You do not want to pick it up after you get done polishing it. It will blister your finger. It's that hot. So what I do is I take my Dremel tool, and it's got these little buffing pads that you've probably seen that you've got. Just like that. All right? And you can see this one I've used a few times, but it doesn't matter. They last till they fly apart. And that's what eventually happens, they fly apart.
Where do you get that?
This you can get at almost any hardware store or automotive store. Yeah, it's for polishing mag wheels. And you just take a look. I just put it on my finger. And I didn't bring a paper towel with me, so we're going to make a mess here. Now here's the number one tip. Don't turn this thing on, because you will get mother of mag polish all over you. So what I do is I just take the cap, hold it on there, give it a little spin. Now if you can get in here real close on this quarter, I'm going to polish this one right here. And even though this is a very worn quarter and you would probably want to look for one that hadn't been circulated quite as much, I intentionally got one that was pretty worn so you could see it. And what will happen is when I first start, it's going to turn black. Now keep watching. There it goes. And just in a couple minutes, I think you can see the difference. So you can take a really worn out looking coin and compare it to this one over here. You can see that's the difference we made in just a minute. Now you know, obviously you have to buff it off a little bit, and inside the letters, it usually leaves a little bit of black, and sometimes you have to take a toothbrush in there to get that out. But once you get that polished off, and even using a jeweler's cloth, some of you probably have used those before on jewelry, even using a jeweler's cloth will polish it up even more. And you can actually do that twice and it'll even get shinier, but you can see that makes a really nice looking coin. And of course you would want to take it out and do the other side. And what I'll usually do is I'll take an X-Acto knife, because I don't want to touch it because it is hot. I'll just flip it over and then do the other side.
You ever thought about just drilling the hole through so you can stick a rod to push it out?
Shut up.
The MDF. Sorry.
I hate guys that have good ideas. I polish before. After you cut them, if you get very detailed, you'll break the coin trying to polish it. A lot of the ones I do, I don't get very detailed. Look at this one right here. This is something that if you just want to practice a little bit, just cut a heart in it. Anything. Now what most guys do that are selling them, and this is pretty popular, they'll take the coin, and the way they'll cut it is they'll come in like this, they'll do a heart, then they'll come out like this, and they'll do a heart, and they'll come out like this, then they'll drill a hole here, and it's for a couple. So one half the couple gets that, the other half gets that. That's a pretty common pattern you'll see out. Some of the coin cutters don't use the design of the coin as the design of the pattern. They'll take a coin and they'll cut, whatever shape in it. And that's pretty popular. Let me show you some of these. I was standing at the show the other day, and a guy come up to me and he said, "I'm a coin cutter." I said, "Oh, cool. I want to give you these." This is what he does. We'll start out with my favorite. I thought that was beautiful. That was out of a Kennedy $50.
That was a quarter or a $50?
This I'm pretty sure was a
I think
$50.
he said it was a quarter, because I got one too.
This one is a quarter?
I got one too.
Oh,
Yeah.
nobody gave me one.
It wasn't a quarter unless he flattened it and made it bigger.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't a quarter.
Yours may have been, you were worth only half as much as
Not good,
Steve.
that's, you're right.
And this one, I don't remember what he said the symbol was, but it's a symbol, and I was not paying enough attention to remember what it is. But you can see there, in that case, he didn't use the design of the quarter to make the jewelry. And the way you can tell it's a coin is by the edge of it. So when somebody looks at it, it takes them a minute sometimes to realize what you did. And this one I thought was really cool. It's a bear cub.
Oh, wow.
Now, if that was a dollar, a silver dollar, and you did that and you sold that in a jewelry store, what do you think it would sell for? It wouldn't sell for $1. So, I don't know. It's a good way to make money, I guess. Right, right. And they do that. They'll take, I've seen these coins sell from anywhere from $50 to $10,000. Now, some of these guys will take gold coins and they'll inlay diamonds in them. I mean, they are serious. The guys that are really serious don't use a scroll saw, they use a handsaw. And they will actually cut out the center of the letters. Like if it's got an O in it, they'll cut out the center of the O and cut around it. And they do it all by hand. And they're fast. They're as fast as I am on the scroll saw.
Do they use a jeweler's saw? Or?
They use a jeweler's saw with the jeweler's blades, just like what we passed around there.
When you finish them and after you've cut them, Steve, do you put anything on them like a varnish or anything to keep it from tarnishing?
I've not heard of any of the guys that do this for a living that they finish the coin. They leave them just plain like they are.
Okay.
If you were worried about tarnishing, especially if you're doing a penny or something like that, a little bit of spray acrylic will seal it. That's exactly what we do on the copper, because as you know, the copper is going to tarnish and it'll almost tarnish before you get it home. So you do have to seal the copper, and we'll get to that in a minute.
Did you ever try any like lubricants on it at all, like petroleum gel? Just to
When you're cutting,
yeah.
when you're cutting, what I do, and we'll do that here in a minute, I use beeswax. And it lubricates the blade. What this does is when you're cutting with any kind of blade, it builds up heat. And heat is your enemy. And on a thinner blade like that, heat is deadly. It'll break those blades just like that. So if you put a little bit of lubricant on it, it really makes the blade last a lot longer. Makes it easier to cut tight turns if you have to. So that's what that's laying there for. I use that.
As like the canoe wax or something?
It's a beeswax.
Beeswax?
Yeah, and I bought it at, I don't want to say where I bought it at, because it wasn't one of these stores. But you can get it in some.
Hobby Lobby has it.
Yeah, exactly.
They actually know there's other stores, so it's okay.
It's not our problem.
David and Heather have been so nice to me since I've been here that I owe them to not say their competitor's name.
Describe the blade and where you got them.
Okay, let's go to that. Flying Dutchman, which is one of the two brands of blades that I personally like the best, is sold at mikesworkshop.com. Now, Mike is a gentleman that originally had the contract to sell the Flying Dutchman brand in North America. Unfortunately, last year he passed away, so he sold the business out to, is it Wooden Teddy Bear?
Wooden
Teddy Bear. That he sold, and they're still great people. They're great to do business with. You can trust them. If you order from them, you're going to get fast, good service. But they sell a line of jeweler's blades, and that's what's in that package that we're passing around. They are different from wood scroll blades because they have a higher number of teeth per inch, and it makes them very efficient for getting those wood fibers out of there, or the metal fibers out of there. So you want to use a metal cutting blade. Now, some of the guys in here I know have cut coins in metal before, and they use blades they're designed to cut steel, and they work. I just think they're a little harder to control because these are so fine and there's so many teeth. When you feel that blade, especially for you that are new, when you put a scroll saw blade in, there's an up and a down, and you want the teeth cutting down. So you can, it's like rubbing a cat backwards. You know, you want to feel that and make the teeth point down. These blades are so fine, sometimes you have to feel a few times to even be able to tell which way is the right side up. So anyway, they have, on Mike's Workshop, they have 3 different sizes, a 3/0, a 2, and a 3, I think are the 3 sizes. I like using the smallest ones, just simply because the smaller they are, the easier. You think they're going to break easier, they all break easy. But these are small enough that you know, as you're turning that blade, it's having to take those metal fibers out of there to make a hole big enough for the blade to turn. And as it's doing that, those metal fibers, it's a smaller dimension that it has to cut. So like if you're coming up here and you've got to turn this way, and your blade is this thick, as that blade comes up here and it goes to turn, as it turns, it has to nibble out all this waste before you can start going this direction. And on wood, it's not that big of a problem. You just spin the piece and it nibbles out really quick. The metal takes a little longer for that to happen. And that's why a lot of times, like I said, instead of going like this, you'll go like this, and then you'll come out in the waist and come back in like that. So all part of the same process.
So I guess they don't use spiral bits then?
Spiral bits would be a disaster.
Sorry, Rob. Oh, rebuttal over here.
When he challenged us to do the coin things after washing yours,
Yeah.
I did set it up on wood, and I used a 2-aught spiral blade to cut it. And it wasn't very smooth, but it actually cut pretty good.
What'll generally, you gotta realize these guys, these are real scrollers. If you're trying this for the first time, don't use a spiral blade. Use a jeweler's blade or at least a metal blade. The spiral blades, you actually won't break them as often because they don't have the same problem with turning as the flat blades do. But what'll happen is, you know how, and you probably all had this thing, you're scrolling out a piece of wood and you're not paying much attention and all of a sudden it starts doing that. You've seen that happen. Well, wait until that happens on a coin. It's an exciting event. You don't want that happening. When it does it on a piece of wood, you pinch your finger and you have to back up and maybe put a Band-Aid on them, but on a coin it can get away from you. And for me personally, when I did try the spiral blades, they're too big and they catch that coin. On this jig, it would probably hold it. On this jig, it would probably break it. And again, that's why, let me back up on this jig. This jig was printed on my 3D printer. And probably, 3 months ago, 2 months ago, I bought a 3D printer just to see if I could use it as part of my hobby that we do in woodworking. And these are the kind of things I came up with. And so this was one of the first things I did. And what you do is this flange right here holds down on the coin. Whereas this one doesn't need the flange to hold it down, it's so tight because it's made out of aluminum. So these are available on my blog for free, the plans are, but you gotta have a way of printing them, which most people don't yet. Now luckily a lot of libraries and there's a lot of maker centers popping up around the country. So if you do want these plans, just go download them. They're easy to make, they just take a long time. This piece right here probably took 4 or 5 hours to print. So it's not a 10-minute job, they take a while.
But you could make that out of a piece of hard
Right.
maple.
And on my blog, there's a YouTube video section. And if you go back and just type in, coin cutting, it'll bring up a video where I show how to make these jigs out of wood. Now the problem is,
Don't talk so much about that jig, talk about that other.
let's stop. Let's stop.
Before you get ready there, why don't we?
Okay, just a second, let's do this. This knob right here does not come with any of these scroll saws. Our guy right here, Marcus, makes these knobs, and he has for a while, and he sells them. So when I brought in that aluminum piece, and I told him that I was looking for somebody to make it, oh, he was all over me. He said, I got the guy that can do that. So if these don't come out and are available in the next couple of months, it's his fault.
At a very reasonable price.
Right.
Steve, on the 3D printer, what filament are you using?
I'm using PLA for all of this, just because it's so easy to print. Let's stop and just do 3D printers real quick, because I know I'm going to put everybody to sleep here real quick. I bought a $200 3D printer, and I did it because I just wanted to test some proof of concept. Can this thing do anything useful, or is all you can do is print Star Wars figures, which is what everybody seems to do with them. I got this 3D printer home for $200, and I set it up. One of the first things I printed was a bolt and a nut, and I went and I put them together, and they fit perfect. And I said, this thing can do something. So I started just coming up with different ideas of things that I could print and use with my hobby of woodworking. That's how all that happened. And this was one of the things that came out of it. For those of you that are new, when you set up a scroll saw blade in a scroll saw, you want that blade to start out at a 90-degree angle to the table. So you'll use some type of square or protractor to do that. There's other ways too, but that normally. So I just printed out these little squares. They have a super magnet at the bottom of them, so you can just leave them on the side of the table. It's not worth anything, but it's handy. And I'm going to give a bunch of these away today. So those are the kind of things I'm doing with the 3D printer. Also for the jet scroll saw, the bottom clamp, everybody hates the bottom clamp on this machine or doesn't like it. So built a little jig to make that easier to do. So if you're interested in 3D printing, you want to email me, we can talk about that.
Ours in the very back.
The hole for the magnet, did you drill it or print it?
No, it's printed. Yep. It's amazing too, because when I'm designing these parts, if I need threads, like I say, if I need a 1/4 inch 20 thread into a part, it's designed in the software and it prints a 1/4 20 inch thread. And I had no idea that I could do anything that detailed with it. So let's don't get off on that too much, because I know there's a lot of people who don't care.
751006 gets one of those squares.
Okay, a couple more things. I briefly talked about the Forstner bit. What a Forstner bit is, it's a drill bit that's big and round, and they come in different sizes. They make a set of Forstner bits that are just for coins. So there'll be one that's the size of a penny. Right. They'll be the size of a penny. When you're going to make the jewelry like this right here, those are really handy to have. Because if you want to inlay it into something, you need that. Now they also sell at most like firemountain.com online that does all the jewelry findings and stuff. They sell gold and silver rings that will hold the coin where you can see both sides, and they already have the clasp built into them. And so if you're really going to get into cutting the coins and you want to make jewelry, you want to look that direction because they just look better. Let's see. I think that's enough. Does anybody have any questions about is anybody interested in even cutting coins? So at least a few. So when you try it, try to get your supplies ready. Have the things that I've shown you here today. The beeswax is important. You'll need one of these jigs. And let's give...
How do you hold the coin in that wooden keychain?
This one right here was super glue. But now, if you look at this one, I used the Forstner bit to drill the hole to inlay the coin. But you can see if I'd have done that, the brad point on the Forstner bit would show. So what I did is I cut a 1/8 inch thick piece of wood into a circle. I drilled my hole deep enough for the coin and the piece of wood, glued the wood in, and then super glued the coin in on top of that. You can also use, I think it's called E6000. It's a real common hobby glue. It works. There's several different things you can use. You could even use epoxy. You just have to be careful that it doesn't squeeze out on you. It's hard to clean up if it squeezes out. But super glue works fine. I use the super glue with the spray activator. It just works better.
Medium?
I use medium for everything. Thin, I don't like thin. Thick, I can sometimes get away with. When I'm actually scroll sawing wooden projects, I'm clumsy, I break a lot of them. I never throw anything away, I just super glue it back together. Because all I'm going to do is take a picture of it and put it on the blog. And I'll go to Photoshop, and if you can still see the seam, I just Photoshop the seam out. That's why none of my stuff ever looks bad. Exactly. So
He thought he never made a mistake.
yeah, you know what? You're not going to see my mistakes, but they're there. So, in a real similar vein to cutting coins, only what I think is actually more useful to the average scroll sawer is cutting copper. These pieces of jewelry that he's passing out were made from a $1 piece of copper pipe that you can buy at Home Depot. And again, I think you'll see that when you get done, they make a reasonably
While
nice piece
Steve
of
is
jewelry.
getting ready to cut something, you're going to cut something?
Yeah,
sir?
I've
While he's
done-
getting ready, I'm going to pass out a couple more items that he has back here.
And it says born to shop.
We've got some blades here.
And it's kind of like what do you call them, a purse tag or something like that? You hang it. I don't know nothing about this stuff, which is kind of funny because when I started cutting this copper on my blog, I told everybody I'm going to make a pattern book full of these so you could go to a craft show with 20, 30, 40 different designs. And what I found out is that designing jewelry patterns is a whole different story from designing scroll saw patterns. It's a different thought process. Britta, she'll tell you, she does jewelry. It's a different technique than designing fretwork or chess pieces or wobble bowls or whatever. So I haven't got this book done yet, but I will be coming out with a whole book of different patterns that you can cut. And I think these would sell well at craft shows. I know some people that are doing it. So I hope this doesn't sound wrong, but there's a feminist touch to jewelry that men don't have. They just don't have. I can design something and I'm all proud of it, and I take it down and I show it to my wife and she goes,
I'd never wear that.
that ain't gonna happen. And most of my woodworking patterns, I don't do that because, you know, you get beat up too bad. But on this stuff, I took it down to show it to her, and I just haven't got to where I'm comfortable with them. And then about a month ago, I had a goldsmith contact me out of Canada who wants me to train him on using the scroll saw because he's a hand cutter. And I went and looked at some of the stuff he does. Now, he's a male, but he's a 5th generation goldsmith. And he designs all these patterns that are just incredible. And so now that I've watched him, I know what they're supposed to look like. And then I do them and I go, they don't look like that. So that's why it's late. I'll eventually put something out there. So it's just going to take me a little while. These blades that he's giving out right now are Pegasus brands. The 2 brands that I like the most are Flying Dutchman and Pegasus. So if you're new to scrolling, these blades don't cost any more than the blades you're going to buy at Lowe's. Oh, there it is. How'd that happen?
Hey!
The quarters
In the
inside
process, I
package.
found it. I almost gave it away, but I found it.
These blades don't cost any more than the ones you're buying at Lowe's, and they're way sharper and they're way stronger. So if you go online to Mike's Workshop, that's where you can get the Flying Dutchman's blades. Those are great blades. I really love the Ultra Reverse. They last a long time. They're sharp. They work great. I also like the Pegasus brands, and you can get just Pegas. If you just do a Google search, there's 2 or 3 different companies that sell those, and they're all about the same price.
Any preference for one over the other?
Company?
Pegasus versus the Flying Dutchman.
If you looked at the post I did last week, I actually took a microscopic picture of all the different blades, the different brands. The Pegasus blades are clearly, you just have to look at the picture to know that they're clearly a superior made blade. And that's all fine. Everybody wants the best quality, especially if it's the same price, which they are. But if you take and look at the Flying Dutchman and you look at the Pegasus, you're going to pick the Pegasus as being better. When you sit down at the saw to cut with them, unless you're Hans or somebody that cuts every day, you're not going to know the difference. They're both good blades.
And they both track
Right.
identically the same.
The modified geometry blades on the Pegasus blades are ground. They're not milled, so they don't have the drift. For those of you that are new, when you cut with a scroll saw, it doesn't cut in a straight line. Because the way the blades are made, there's an actual burr on one side of the blade, so when you start cutting, that burr makes it want to drift, usually this way actually. So you'll see that as you're cutting a straight line, your board will end up like this. And most people will move over to the side so they can push straight into the blade. But anyway, the modified geometry blades, the reason I moved to them on my website was because I like that not having a drift. Because when you come out of a turn, if you're coming this way and say you're having to cut on an angle like this, so your board's actually like this and you're cutting this line. When you come out of the turn, that's where it makes the most difference, because if you come out of the turn with a blade that's going to cut on an angle, you have to guess that angle as you're turning. If you come out of a turn with a blade that's going to cut straight, you already know the direction that blade's going to go. And that's a subtle difference, and maybe not everybody will feel that. I know she's shaking her head. I think she knows what I'm talking about. You don't have to guess on that modified geometry blade it's going to come out straight. Now, the only thing I've seen on the modified geometry is every once in a while you'll get one that'll drift maybe a half a degree the opposite direction of a normal blade. So you do still have to readjust sometimes. But that's why I went. Let me back up. Let me be honest. I went through them for that reason, plus I get them for free. So
That helps a lot.
throw that in there too. So
They're also very good. They're easier to cut thicker wood with. The
Yeah,
modified geometry.
they're very sharp and they're very hard
They're wider
steel.
curve.
They're Pegasus, Pegas. Everybody says Pegasus. Now I do that sometimes too, but it's actually Pegasus. And they're made out of Switzerland. The Flying Dutchman are made out of Germany. And if you know the 2 countries, they're both known for excellent engineering. I mean, that's what they do. You know, if you get a razor blade, it's either going to come out of Germany or Switzerland. It's because they're the only people in the world that have the technology to make that blade that sharp. So, questions on that?
Back up about 30 to 40 minutes.
All right.
Why can you not just drill holes when this coin is in this jig?
I do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I do. Maybe I didn't mention that. But before you go to your drill press or use your hand drill or whatever to drill the holes in the coin, mount it in the jig because it makes it really easy to hold it while you're drilling holes. So if I didn't make that point, that's a good
He
point.
just had loose jigs around, but he had done that in the coin, and he
Yeah.
kind of hid the coin.
Well, I wasn't sure I'd have a drill press here, so I drilled everything up front. And again, don't forget that when you get done, you're going to have that burr on the back of that coin, and it's sharp, so don't cut yourself picking it up. You want to get that. sand it off. And this won't get all of it. And of course, if you're going to use it as a double-sided piece of jewelry, this will mar it up a little bit. So in that case, use little rat tail files and get in there and file it down. But if you're going to put it in a piece like this, you're not concerned about the back side of it. So you can get it off real quick with your sandpaper. So that's that. And real quick, I'll show you the speed that it takes to cut a coin.
It's at full speed right now, sir.
Well, that's a good point. Two types of speed. The speed of the saw, both saws are variable speed, and the feed rate speed. They're two totally different things. For the most part, when you are scroll sawing into wood, this is my opinion, people vary on this opinion, turn the speed up as high as you can get it without losing control. There's no reason to slow down with a couple of exceptions, to slow the machine down as long as you haven't increased your vibration or you've lost control. And when you will generally lose control at a higher speed is when you're cutting very thin stock, because you don't have the resistance against the blade, and the blade tends to want to get away from you. So then you slow it down. Sometimes I'll slow it all the way down if I'm cutting less than 1/8 inch thick or something real soft. And this is about the speed, and there's a real good possibility I'll break this blade because they do break pretty easy. Matter of fact, I'm probably going to break it intentionally just to show you what happens. So let's cut a little bit and then we'll break it.
If he tries to break it, he won't break it.
Oh yeah, I'll break it. When you're putting a jeweler's blade in, you tend to get nervous because they're so thin and you think, oh, I don't want to put any tension on it. The tension that you put on a blade in its perpendicular motion, you can tension the heck out of it because you're pulling straight against something that's very strong. When you break a blade, it's because it gets side tension. That's when it breaks. So don't lessen your tension just to try to keep from breaking the blades. If they're breaking, it's probably not that you have it over tensioned. It's more than likely that your clamps are bad or you push the blade too hard one direction or the other.
And the hardest part of putting that blade in, it's almost square. And so you put it in. I put it in twice with the teeth going that way.
Right.
What I'm saying, because you put it in and feel it, and it's tough.
When we get to talking about this saw, I'll leave this blade in here because I want anybody that wants to touch this machine to come up and sit down in front of it. Even if you don't want to cut, at least come up here and look at it, get a close look at it. And we'll talk a little bit more about this saw in a minute. I don't work for Seiko, and they're not paying me to have this saw here or at the show. I wanted people to see the new machine. I know Ray, I know the manufacturer, so they allowed me to bring it to the show. But I'm not making any money for this, so I can say bad things about them if I want.
You didn't pay me for the knob.
Yeah, and I'm going to say bad things about you anyway.
Okay. I'll hold it.
I think we lost it. There it goes. I have a hard time keeping my hand out of the way.
It wasn't plugged in.
Now, I'm not going to intentionally try to cut a pattern. I just want you to see the speed that these blades can cut at. And then after I show you a normal speed, we'll speed it up and see if we can break it. As long as I'm cutting... There you go. As long as I'm cutting straight into the teeth, this blade can take quite a bit of stress. So you can see I'm cutting at a pretty good speed. And it's not going to take this foot switch is funky. Yeah. You can see I'm able to cut at a pretty good speed. Now I'm going to try to turn this thing faster than I would want to turn a coin. If I can keep my hand out of the way.
Like that.
Oh,
That's
no.
what happens. You cannot turn those blades like that. On a piece of wood, even hardwood, when you're cutting and you're going to make a 90-degree turn, you can spin that. And as a matter of fact, if you don't spin it, sometimes you'll have more trouble than if you do. But you'll see Hans or somebody cutting, they'll get to that turn and it's just boom, this the other direction. You can't do that here. Don't try to make that turn. What I should have done is backed out, and then if I wanted to make a turn, come in the other direction. So it's more of a nibbling. I don't need it, that's enough. I just wanted to show them the speed. It's more of a nibbling than a cutting like traditional fretwork. Just nibble the pieces away.
You put the beeswax on,
Normally before I start, I'll take this beeswax, turn the saw on and just lay it right there and lay it right there and just coat it up. And then I may use this 5 or 6 times during one coin just to keep it good and lubricated. You'd be surprised how much difference that makes. It cuts faster, smoother. It's similar to using the blue painter's tape on a scroll. Do you know about the blue painter's tape? When you're cutting fretwork and you want to put your pattern on the wood, generally what you'll do is you'll put down a layer of blue painter's tape on the wood first and then spray adhesive the pattern to the top of the blue painter's tape. Does 2 things. One is when you go to take the pattern off, you just peel the tape off. That spray adhesive will get so sticky sometimes you'll be 20 minutes trying to get it off. The other thing it does, which is something everybody finds surprising, is the glue on the back of this tape lubricates the blade. So you'll be cutting along and all of a sudden the edge of your wood will start burning or the blade seems like they're wearing out real fast. If you start out with this blue painter's tape, you won't have those problems, especially on woods like cherry that want to burn real easy. I use blue painter's tape on everything. Packing tape works fine too, except most people obviously put the packing tape on top of the pattern. Some people put it on the bottom, but it's a little harder to glue it to the packing tape. I like the blue painter's tape better, but the clear packing tape is like 5 times cheaper.
But I use that for the 3D.
This is a copper cuff that I scrolled my wife's name out of and then just put a couple little hearts on it for designs. These are really popular, and this piece that I have right here in front of me actually comes from a jewelry supplier. You can buy these 6-inch by 1-inch pieces. You can buy these 6-inch by 1-inch pieces online, and they're 22 gauge copper. I think they're a little bit thin, but they seem to be fine. They seem to hold up okay. They also have a protective coating on them when you get them, and you can leave that coating on while you're cutting them, and keeps it from marring it up. You can use. And then, of course, you saw the copper pipes. The copper pipes are what we made these pieces out of. So anything that's this size, piece of jewelry, which is going to be, what, 90% of everything you cut for jewelry, you can use the copper pipe. Now, the 2 copper pipes that I passed out, one of them was solid and one of them have a slot in it. You have to have a pretty decent little hacksaw. I bought a small hacksaw and I put it in my clamp and I just cut it in half. The last 1/4 inch of cutting, it wants to collapse on you, so you kind of go, sometimes you have to back up and do the other side. Once you get the slot cut in it, then the hard part starts. Then you got to flatten it out. To get this flat, just beat it flat with a hammer. And I know it looks like it mars it up pretty bad, but when you get done, you can buff that out and make it, as shiny as these pieces. And these are not buffed out to a high degree.
You use the same buffing material you use on the other?
I actually use a not a flap sander, but a mop sander to sand these. I actually just sand them I use like a 220 grit, which is, believe it or not, seems to shine them up pretty well. And then you can just you can use this same stuff to put it on too. But just keep in mind, if you do that on these, they've got that plastic coating on them, so take the plastic off first, because I didn't on the first time and it makes a mess. Because I didn't know it was there.
What's the trick of taking that off?
Just knowing that it's there. Yeah, but you got to know it's there. And, I'm not a jeweler. I didn't know that it was on there. So you can also buy sheet copper online. It's not cheap. I think this piece was close to $10. But if you think about it, if you can get, 10 or 15 pieces of jewelry out of there, if you're going to sell it or if you're going to give it away a gift, $10 is not that big a deal. Because you're going to get a few pieces out of that. Different gauges of copper. This is a 16 gauge. And I'll pass this around and you're going to see this is much, much more dense and heavy. This would be, I think, pretty hard to make a bracelet out of because you're never going to get this bent smooth enough. And to get this bracelet bent into shape, I basically figured out what an average wrist size would be, and I cut a circle in wood with my scroll saw that was this thick, and I kept the cutoff pieces. All right, so I cut the circle. Well, let me show you. Took a block of wood, 3/4 inch thick. Actually, it was 1 inch thick. I cut a circle right here that's about the size of a wrist, and I split it here, and I split it here. So now I've got 3 pieces. I wrapped this piece around here, put these 2 pieces against it, and clamped them. I left it there about an hour, and it came out like that. Now, the jewelers that do this for a living, if you go to like firemountain.com or someplace, you'll find a little device that they use to where I won't be able to draw it, but it's similar to this with a kerf cut in it right here, and it's got a handle on it. And they stick the piece in here, and then they just roll it around by hand to make the shape. And I'm sure that's a better way of doing it because that's the way all the professionals do it, but I didn't want to buy one of those, so I just did this. And this worked. Okay, where are we at? So the different gauges of copper. I think this would be better for necklaces or maybe even earrings. Pass that around. And then, like I said, that's a 16 gauge copper, so it's pretty thick. It's basically the same thickness as these pipes, which are pretty thick. Yeah.
Well, you might want to feel the two.
So when you go on Amazon or you go on to Fire Mountain or any other jeweler site online, when you get ready to buy your copper, realize that the lower the number, the thicker it is. 16 gauge is pretty thick. 26 gauge is pretty thin. So,
How about
watch
what's the, for that one right there?
this right here,
Yeah.
this is a 22 gauge. And when I first got it, I thought this feels, well, as a matter of fact, you can see the plastic coating on this one. That's how it comes off. But if you hit that with a piece of sandpaper or something, it really makes a mess. So, but these you don't really have to buff. They're pretty shiny because that's what they're made for.
Would you want to leave that on, like
When I'm cutting, I leave it on.
lubricate?
Well, the first time I was cutting one, I left it on because I didn't know it was on there. But after that, I thought, well, I better leave it on there because when I sandwich it, let me go back to that part. The idea of cutting these, you can't put this on your scroll saw because you can't hold on to it. Plus, it might mar your table. So what you do is you take two 1/8 inch thick pieces of Baltic Birch plywood, cut them down to 1 inch by 6 inch. All right. Then you take your bracelet, template, blank, whatever you want to call it, and you sandwich it like this. Then you take your blue painter's tape and wrap it all the way around. And then you apply your pattern on top of that. So you have these two waste pieces of board that you're going to throw them away, but you can't do it without them. So then you drill your entry holes and you do all your cuts from there. Then when you get done and take it apart, of course, your pattern's in your blank. So that's how that's done.
What blade do you cut that with?
Good question. I use the exact same blade I use on the coins. I use the jeweler's blade, only I use the biggest one, not the littlest one. Now, most of the guys in here have used metal cutting blades, and they'll work fine on this too. I'm just hooked on these blades because they cut so clean. And the last thing you want to do is end up having to file this a lot when you get done to get all the burrs off of it. There's no burrs. They're made for cutting jewelry. They have to be fine. So I like these.
Steve, the size goes the same way on the blades, right?
Yes, good point. Just like we were talking about the thickness of the copper, you know, the numbering will confuse you, but like this blade here is it's a kind of a funny naming convention that Flying Dutchman uses because they put the J in front of it for the jewelers, and then the 3/0 is how do they usually say that? 3.0, I think, or 3, yeah, 3, yeah, whatever. So that's the smallest one they make. Now you can get scroll saw blades even smaller than this for puzzles and stuff. But I think you could probably even use a puzzle blade for this, but I wouldn't. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't just because, you know, these are made for what they are and why not use them. Okay, let's let's give that away. Let's do that first. And this box took a little bit of beating in the shipping, but I took it out and made sure everything was good and everything. There's one thing, you know, once you get your hearing protection on, you want to control that dust so you're not breathing that dust all along. And as you know, a new scroll sawer, do get a dust mask. Don't pay any attention to what Hans do or I do or we all do in these videos. Do not follow what we do. Use your dust protection. It really is important.
There's a problem with that.
Go ahead.
I think that ticket is in my pocket because it hasn't come out before anything. Everybody's picked it up.
How many tickets are left?
None. I just went, you saw me just throwing them out.
Okay, how are we going to do this then?
The ticket's in my pocket.
I've got a bunch of tickets in the car, but we'd have to pass them out again. Is there an easier way of doing it?
Well, you give it to me.
I'll tell you who I'm going to give it to. I'm going to give it to, how many people are just here for the first time?
Well, that lady right, oh, look. The lady right there just bought a
So-
scroll saw.
So we've narrowed it down quite a bit. Is it okay with everybody? Because we got more prizes. Is it okay if we give this to one of the new people? That'd be okay? So go get tickets or a piece of paper from the new. Give the tickets to the new people and let's give that
But
away.
if they win, they have to become a member.
Okay.
Will somebody do that for me? Okay. We could give out this foot switch.
Let's do that.
You want to?
Because I'm about done anyway.
How are you gonna give it out though?
Here are the last things I want to do, just so everybody knows. I want to talk about this Seiko scroll saw and why it is where it is and what it replaced and all that stuff. And that won't take but just a few minutes. Then I want anybody who wants to touch this machine or cut on it or whatever they want to come up and sit down at it and see what this new machine looks like. This machine is not out yet. It's going to be out sometime in the next few weeks. It's real close. But it is a higher end machine. It's going to be in that $900 range, a little more than $900. It did just today, where'd our magazine go? It did just today make it out in Scroll Saw Woodworking and Craft magazine, which really ticks me off because I wanted to be the first one to show it. And I technically was because I showed it at the show, so I beat them by a day, but I wanted to get an online review of it. I'm going to take this saw back to my shop this week, and I'll probably have it another 2 weeks, and I'll put out a pretty good video review on it. And then in full disclosure after that, when I send this prototype machine back to him, he will be sending me another machine, and I will get that for free. So when you see my review, you know, if you ask, is he biased? Yes, I'm biased. So just deal with it. You know, it's just the way it works. I'll be honest, but
Are you raffling this off too? the machine?
no, it's not mine. So anyway, I think they've got this for sale out on their, I don't know if they're open though, are they? But anyway, they have this for sale if you want to read their review. I'm pretty sure their review's not as good as mine, but I haven't read it yet, so.
We both could do better.
Yeah.
Now we have this left, sir, and
Have we give that? Oh, you, okay,
I've taken
so,
the tickets and I've matched it to something, sir, and I know that this particular lady has this, needs this.
okay, let me see the name. Are we ready?
Yeah, we're ready.
Debbie Arnold,
Debbie Arnold needs this.
can you come up and get your foot switch?
Yeah, you need a foot switch for your saw. Well, it's an electronic foot switch. You need this for your saw,
That's a nice switch, congratulations.
because it'll work well on your saw, right?
Yes, I hope so.
You hope so. You got a good saw. What kind of saw do you have?
I don't know, Steve is a loner.
She has my old Delta saw.
Oh, what a shame.
What a
Well,
shame.
use it on your sewing machine.
Do you think this will work on that? Do you think this will work on this, sir?
I got a new wall.
You know, you can put these on your dishwasher. You have to stand there the whole time. And if your husband don't have anything to
And
do,
it'll spin. It's spin cycle. You know, you just change it.
if you've got a bedroom light, you can, or if you're watching TV, you can hold this foot switch down, and you can only watch TV while you got the switch held down.
Just give it to Steve.
Hang on, let me see that a second. Let me show them what it is. This is called a dead man switch. And for those of you that don't use foot switches on your scroll saw, you need one. When you're cutting, when you push on this switch, your scroll saw runs. When you let off the switch, it stops. It's not an on-off switch. And this will give you much better control as a scroller. You want a dead man switch on your saw. The other thing you can do is you can plug if you want to use a vacuum cleaner with your scroll saw, you can plug your vacuum cleaner into this also, so you only have dust collection while the saw's running. And if you're like me and you can't stand the noise of that dust collector, this will really help a lot. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. There's an accessory that goes with that we forgot.
There's a what?
There's an accessory for that we forgot to give you.
Yeah, we forgot to give you accessory.
It goes with that right there.
What?
Yep, it goes with that. Congratulations. I wouldn't kid you. Congratulations.
Oh my goodness.
And you might even find somebody who can put it in the car.
Now, like I said, you're going to have to come. You have to come to the meetings here.
I will.
Now, I'm sure. Watch this. I'm sure, if by chance you can't have a vehicle to get it in, I'm sure there's a number of people that will help get it out of here.
Let me tell you just a little bit about this saw. This is probably the most popular saw on the market. It's a DeWalt DW788. They've been around for, how long have these been around? Probably 20 years plus.
Yes.
Of course, they've upgraded the model a little bit over the years. So this is the one saw that if you can afford it, it's about a $500 saw, a little bit more than that with the stand. If you can afford it, this is where I tend to take everybody who's just getting into the hobby. This is the first saw that you'll get to where the blade clamp is actually works like you want it to work. You get anything cheaper than that, the blade clamps just get tedious. And if you're doing fret work, like any of this stuff you see over here, and you're taking that blade in and out all the time, you want this to be easy. Now, the really good news is this even has another accessory on it that this gentleman right here makes, Marcus. The thumb screws on these, everybody hates them because when you do this 1,000 times, they get sore. So Marcus donated a couple of his comfort knobs to put on this saw.
One more thing on that comfort knob. Hans uses a lot and y'all ain't picked the guitar so your fingers ain't tough. Put you some electric tape around.
Yeah, make it a little, so
Still
it's
has
knurled.
grip, but it won't-
Yep.
your fingers
And then
ain't so bad.
another accessory that comes with this saw is the DeWalt had one thing they designed that they never fixed, and that is the arm doesn't stay up. What this is called the lifter. And basically when you put this on, when it lifts up, it'll lock in the up position. So if you wonder what this is, that's what it is. And they're pretty easy to install. And if you have any questions, email me.
And I need some help, what I need from the audience. Because we had this full comeback box, and we know that, you know, that would be really bad to have poor Steve bring that item back. So Steve is going to get the item in the comeback box, but you get the comeback box, ma'am, and you have to bring us something back next month.
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't
It does
matter
not
what it
matter
is.
what it is.
And I'll give you an idea. If you go to Steve Good Scroll Saw, you can pick any pattern you want.
And the easiest,
See, I got you out of there, Steve.
the
See?
easiest pattern I have on my site is a round to it. So just download the round to it and give that back to them.
And the other pattern that I love to teach beginners, and believe it or not, it's right here, and you laugh and say, well, this is difficult.
Yeah.
But if you do
Yeah,
this,
perfect.
you take a single block of wood, he's got squares, whatever, and what it does, by the time you get done, you're able to make these cuts quite well. And no matter, you never went out of the lines. You know, you're the only one that knows when the pattern's off, okay? But when you put it together, it always comes out.
The first time I took this to a show where I was selling them, there was a lady walked up within 5 minutes. She bought every one of them I had, and she was making. They were bigger than this one, and she was using them for Christmas. Put Christmas items in, and then she was going to decorate them. So these are actually pretty popular because when you look at them, you have a hard time telling how they were made. And the big thing about this is you can make bowls out of multiple pieces of boards, but this one comes out of your scrap. You know, if you've got a 1/4-inch piece of scrap that's that big, you can make something that's pretty nice.
And if you cut it out of 1 inch, it becomes 9 inches high.
Don't do that. It looks terrible. It looks terrible out of. As a designer, that kind of stuff just kills me.
I sell them for lampshades.
I design stuff, and the reason I put thickness of a board to use is because I'm looking at proportion. And this thing made out of 1-inch slabs looks like a bunch of slabs put together. Okay, so don't listen to him. Make it out of 1/4 inch.
You have to bring something you make at the next meeting. You're the comeback lady. You took that off of Steve's shoulders.
Here's something.
Because I figured you'd rather have what he gave you than what was in the comeback box.
Take that and let her finish that. Maybe she can finish.
Oh,
That's what I got done at the show this weekend.
That's an accessory. And look, and he's going to give you a pattern to cut also. That he started already.
That when I went to the show, I was going to demonstrate, and I actually bought 3 different patterns with me to cut, and that's all I got done. I mean, this thing just went. So, let me look at my notes. We want to talk about the Seiko. Let's do that real quick, and then I'm going to get you all out of here. About 9 months ago, the company that manufactures and distributed the Excalibur scroll saw in North America, those 2 companies got in a fight. So about 9 months ago, when you went online to try to buy an Excalibur scroll saw, which is probably the most popular high-end saw sold, okay, you couldn't get them. They were back ordered. Nobody would talk. I talked to all my inside sources. they were just, it was tight-lipped. So you could tell there was some legal action going on. There just was no question what was happening. That went on for several months. I finally started hearing from an employee who worked inside one of the companies, and I got a little bit more of the story. And it basically just boiled down to a contract dispute. And there's a lot more to it than that, but a contract dispute. It's not going to get solved. That's not official. The company won't say it's not going to get solved. They're still showing as back ordered, but I can guarantee you they're not coming back because the company that manufactured the Excalibur contacted Seiko, the gentleman's name's Ray Seymour that owns the company, and asked him if he would introduce this machine into North America. Well, if you think back about it, when Excalibur, or when General Tool had this machine in North America, they were the sole contractor or the sole supplier of this tool. That was contractual. You couldn't sell this machine. They did get it into Woodcraft and other different places, but they were all sold originally as a distributor through General Tools, General International. So now that this machine has come out, obviously that contract is either gone or the manufacturer's breaking it or whatever. So Ray agreed to bring this tool back out with a few different designs. And he designed it with a larger table. He added this angle gauge. This is a pre-production model, and it's taken a beating because it's been traveled around a lot. There will be a dust tray right here. He changed the mechanism that you tilt the table with. And like I said, he has the angle gauge. And if you don't know, when you tilt the table on a scroll saw, a lot of times you're tilting it to a specific angle to do, you know, like a particular bowl where you're cutting them at an angle and then stacking them together. You want to be able to repeat that angle, you know, and sometimes you'll move it and need to get back to it. So that's why he added this. The larger table was a big request for years for the Excalibur, just better support, especially in front of the blade. A lot of people complained, if you look at the DeWalt over here, which is the most popular, he had all this up front space. When the Jet came out, they probably more than cut it in half.
2 inches.
Yeah, and nobody seems to like, it doesn't bother me, but I cut mostly small pieces. But if you're cutting bigger pieces, you want that support up front. So Ray went back and added some up front table to it. He added some graphics on a pad that is replaceable, which is different than any other scroll saw you've ever seen. I like it because it's so slick. And when you're moving a board on top of a table, especially on some of the later DeWalt scroll saws, this table can be very rough. And so you're constantly putting wax on it to keep it smooth. You're never going to have to do that on this one. So I like that part.
Is there a zero clearance insert for that?
There is not. A zero clearance insert is this hole right here is big enough that if you cut very small pieces, like with Hans's birdhouses, this hole can be too big. And so you can actually take an accessory table and put on top and make the hole smaller. That's what he's talking about.
This weekend was not a problem.
Well, that's
Right.
sold separately, take their pay and pay it to that.
Well, that's what I'm hoping. And again, I'm not selling this for Seiko, and I haven't had enough conversation to know what Ray's thoughts are on everything. But it would be interesting. Think how easy it would be to make a zero clearance on this if he would just sell you this piece with no hole in it. You make it any size you want. Yeah.
Was that iron or aluminum?
It's not aluminum because it's magnetic.
Magnetic.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I use these little things that these guys pass out with the advertising on them. That stick
Yeah,
this on your
little
refrigerator.
magnets.
They run that up on there and
Right.
you got a zero clearance.
She has a better idea. Stacey, I thought it was a metric.
Flip it around.
Magnet.
Yeah, 180. Yeah.
But the other side was a small model, you know, zero clearance, just switch that thing around.
Don't have the bullseye, whatever that's for.
That is a perfect example of why you want to get into a hobby that includes women. Guarantee you they'll come up with ideas that no man will come up with. You guys know, admit it right now, we wouldn't have come up with that for the next 10 years. And finally, somebody would have said, hey, I got an idea. And then she's going to email you and said, I was doing that 10 years ago.
And we would come out and order a replacement piece for it.
And paid at least $100.
Send that to him, so that's zero clearance.
If he implements that, I'll give him your email address.
Could that table be made quiet like the other
When the guys brought this into the show and set it up, they just set it up. However, this is too low for me. I sit on a taller stool, and it's a little bit too much of an angle. And the reason this is at an angle, for those of you that are new, is when you're scrolling, you don't want to scroll like this all day long, because your back will go on you. You want to set up as straight as you can, but you also want to be able to look down on that hole, because you're cutting in one certain spot, and looking at it like this, you won't have the same depth perspective on the pattern line as if you're looking at it like this. So this table is tilted a little bit too much for me, but because it's got the longer table, it does have to have a little bit more tilt to it to feel comfortable. And everybody's going to adjust these different. On this machine, you can adjust the front and the back leg, so you can get it anywhere you want it. Some people cut flat. I can't do it. Does anybody in here cut flat? Do you? I can't do it. Yeah, yeah.
It also goes with the spiral blade though.
But for me to be comfortable, this would have to be at about this level.
When Rob cuts with a spiral blade, he has a table like this.
Which makes a whole lot of sense, because the sawdust all goes that direction.
That's why you have a dust collector.
Yeah, and that's another thing that Ray added. This little right angle blower, this is the air blower that blows the dust away from the cut. And the reason this is angled is so you can get it in front of the blade and blow the dust back this way.
Into this dust collector.
Sounds like a little thing, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how big of a deal that is. Because the dust that comes off of a scroll saw is pretty fine dust, and it will float. And you really don't want that in your lungs, or you end up like me and Hans. It's just like,
What if you can get that little right angle piece to put on ours?
that's a good, I know you can, because this is all off the shelf stuff. Yeah, MasterCard probably sells these right off the shelf. Yeah, you can. See, I'm telling you.
I didn't hear MasterCard at all. Steve, good website coming up in 2 months.
I just spent $20. She just did it for free. What are you going to do? So anyway, anybody that wants to come up after we stop here, or even right now, and just sit in front of this machine and touch it and look at it real close. I will show you the one thing that I don't like about it, and I think me and Hans agree on this. On the Excalibur, they used a rack and pinion system down here, so when you loosen the arm, when you loosen this right here, so you can tilt. Oh man, who did that?
Can you move on the other side, sir? So the camera that goes up on the screen.
When you're going to do angle cuts on the Excalibur line of machines, this head tilts. And on the Excalibur, the original one, you had a knob down here that as you turned it, it would tilt this head. Now it's all manual, and I don't like this. But so when you get ready to go put it back,
It's harder to adjust.
it's hard. I think it's harder to adjust. The reason he did it is he said his comment was that a rack and pinion has two sets of teeth that come together like this. All right, there's slop in those teeth, and that slop can add up to a half a degree of error. But as scroll sawers, we never use the gauge. How many of you guys use that gauge down there? Nobody. We all use our little right angles. Yeah, we all use something different to set it, because nobody wants to get under the table to look at that gauge. Plus, it's never accurate anyway. Right, so I think that was his thinking, but I just don't agree. Let's see, what else? That's pretty much the differences. A lot of people ask about how useful I think this is. It's a gadget. I like bells and whistles, and my wife will tell you, if it flashes, beeps, and I can push a button, I'm going to buy it. It's just me.
But if you have a DeWalt or a Jet or Delta or whatever you have, and it has a metal table or iron table, that'll work on any saw. And this is an accessory you can buy.
On my Jet saw, I mounted a little bracket that comes up here, and I just bought one of these Wixie gauges and set it right there. And I did it for a blog post. I'll be honest, I haven't used it, because I never tilt the table. I mean, I occasionally will do a bowl.
What's the white lever on the top?
This? On this machine, the blade is held in by a thumb screw clamp, and this is the tensioner. So when you loosen this right here and put the blade in it, you tighten it down, and then you do this, and that puts the tension on the blade. If you're used to the old saws from years ago, this was the tensioner. This is not a tensioner anymore on this machine. This is an adjusting wheel that adjusts the upper and lower arms to parallel. And the reason they do that is a scroll saw, when it's cutting, the blade's going like this in an arc. Just because of the design of how they don't go, to make a blade go straight up and down, you gotta have pistons on the top and the bottom that do this. That's the only way to get a straight cut. You can actually do it with a chain, but long story. So on these link drive system, which is what this is called, there's a little bit of an angle, or a little bit of movement front to back on the blade. The more front to back movement you have, the more aggressive that's gonna cut. The faster it's gonna cut, but also the less accurate it's gonna cut. So on these machines, there's an adjustment where you can change that front to back movement and make it less. Production cutters that cut 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, they'll turn that aggressiveness up because they're talented enough, they're skilled enough, they can still do detailed stuff and cut fast. They have to cut fast or they go out of business. So they'll turn it up. For the rest of the world, we usually turn it down to minimize that front to back movement. And you do that by setting this parallel first, and then you can also adjust this motor over here. The motor turns. And that adjustment's in the book on this machine that tells you how to do it. On the Excalibur that we don't have in there, nobody ever told you about that adjustment. Either found it online or something, but so I used to get complaints all the time that, man, this thing is really jumping all over the place. And that's, the adjustment hadn't been done.
That jet has that same adjustment.
Right, right. The DeWalt does not have that adjustment. The DeWalt is considered one of the more aggressive cutting saws, but it's not so bad that you can't do detailed work with it. Just a little bit more practice. So don't let that scare you. It's not. What we're talking about here, we're cutting hairs. It's not that big a deal. Do what?
The RBI.
The RBI is a very aggressive cutting machine also, but it's built like a tank. You could cut 8 hours a day on that machine. You're never going to wear it out. So these are the most popular. This I would consider a mid-range saw. These would be in the high-range money because you're getting up closer to $1,000, and then you can go to the more expensive machines where you can go up to $2,000 or $3,000. But you know, unless you're going to cut every day or you're just like having expensive tools, you can get away with any of this. And I tell people all the time to buy this saw, you know, because it does everything you want it to do. You can even go to Harbor Freight and buy that one for $70. And it'll cut your project as long as you only want to cut 1 or 2 projects, and then you know you might have to buy another one. So,
Mr. Steve, we need to
wrap it up. Somebody asked me if I could talk long enough to be here, and unfortunately, I could talk all night. So,
Well, we didn't have any doubt.
as you can tell, I'm passionate about this hobby. I'm passionate about bringing new people into the hobby, and I'm passionate about being a community. And that's what is so amazing about the demographics. And of course, on a website, you always follow your demographics, what age group, you know, all this stuff to know how to build a better website. And my demographics range in that 45 to 55. That's pretty well the average of the age. And believe it or not, it's over 40% women. And that's the great part of our hobby because they bring a totally different perspective to the hobby. The 2 best pattern designers in the world, Sue May, Sheila Landry. Can't beat either one of them, and they're both women.
And the Kathy Wise.
Kathy Wise, if you're into it, Tarja, Judy Gale Roberts. I mean, just keep going. That's where it's at. You have to have, in what we do, if you look at everything around here and you took any of this stuff to a craft show, who's going to buy it? It's not going to be the men. The men do it for the fun and the challenge. The women do it because they want something pretty in their house. And so they bring that perspective to our hobby that the wood turners have a little bit, but not very much, and the flat wood workers don't hardly have it at all. There's a few girls that do it, but for the most part, all the designers are men. So we're really fortunate that we have diversity in our hobby. So with that, I appreciate you all letting me stand up here and talk for a couple of hours. I hope you have a little bit of